Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Talbot County Board of Education work session for Monday, November 17th. We do have a quorum present, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, I assume everybody's had a chance to take a look at the agenda, so I guess we just want to say that we're going to approve the agenda for tonight. Do we need a motion on that? Yes. So I'll make a motion. Do I have a second? Perfect. All right, so to kick it off, we'll start with our, looks like our work session meeting presentation.
I think we want to approve the previous month's minutes.
About that. We do need to approve the minutes from our October meeting. All right, so this is the first thing on our agenda. It looks like our cell phone pouches. Is that correct? All right. We'll hand it over to Ms. Clausen.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for having me here this evening representing Easton Middle School. We have some updated information about the implementation of our Yonder pouches. We've implemented it for about 10 months now that we started in December of last year. Great. And on the slide, you'll see some graphics from Yonder. They sent these over. They give us a plethora of information and different things that we can share with families, we can put in our newsletters just to support the implementation.
You could just tell me next slide.
Yeah, next slide. Thank you. So I have some beginning discipline data for you from the start of this school year. So from the first day of school, August 25th, through November 12th, which was last week, we have our overall discipline data summary. There were so far 107 discipline referrals. That constitutes 56 specific students. Of those referrals, 0 of them were electronic offenses, which is pretty phenomenal. There were 7 referrals that did involve a phone, and those were 4 different individuals. Now, the reason it wouldn't constitute an electronic offense was because there was some other situation where there may have been like a disruption that was more appropriate for the coding, but the phone was somehow involved. It probably more than likely was not the beginning issue. It just through the situation kind of evolved that it was somehow involved in the situation. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide. So with our 39 students, this is the level of infraction as far as our progressive discipline. So we very clearly rolled out what happens the first offense, second, third, and fourth. And that is, if you actually, Dr. Pepakai, if you'll go forward, that's okay. You can see that here. So for the first offense, the phone gets turned in to the office. If you go in our main office, there's a shoe rack hanging on one of our main doors. The student goes in, they place the phone there, it lives there for the day. The first offense, they get the phone back at the end of the day. Second offense, the phone is turned in and it requires a parent or guardian pickup at the end of the day. Third offense, the phone's turned in, a referral is written, and the student is in our Checkmate In room for the day, and it also requires a parent pickup. If you go back to the slide previous to this, you will see that at this point in the school year, we have not had anybody reach that third offense yet. again, that's pretty phenomenal with 726 students. Fourth offense, the phone's turned in, parent pickup, and then the student is required to turn their phone in daily for the remainder of that quarter. So depending on where we are in the quarter, they then have to turn it in for the remainder of that time. So I also broke it down by grade level. So you'll see that the infractions are pretty consistent across the grade levels. There wasn't one that stood out more than the others. So sixth grade so far, out of that first offense, we have 13 sixth graders, 14 seventh graders, and 12 eighth graders. Questions so far? Okay.
So now come the questions. How do we know that the students are actually closing the pouches? Because I'm hearing that they're being used, but not necessarily sealed. But then they're not necessarily taking them out, even though they aren't sealed.
So one of the things we've implemented is we have our daily announcements that get recorded and they are pushed out to families every morning. As part of that, they're also played in the classrooms. We play them in English and in Spanish. And one of the pieces every morning after the pledge is you'll hear Mrs. Quick say, "Okay, students, it's that time. Get out your yonder pouches. Put your cell phones away." And classroom teachers are in there and, they monitor whether students are putting in. Sometimes we're being told that we don't have a phone to put in the pouch. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if the phone comes out, administration is called. So, the phones are not coming out. Teachers are saying to us, kids are far more engaged in the lessons. They're not having to police the phones. We're seeing students talk to one another more. That's huge. So it's a work in progress because there are 726 children. There's no way to police that every single phone gets put in the pouch and locked every single day. We are very consistent with our expectations, so that I think is really helpful.
When at the end of the day, when the students are supposed to be unlocking the pouches with the magnets, are you seeing a flow of students actually doing that? Because again, I'm hearing that they're not sealing them to start with. So I figure, observing them, unlocking them would maybe be some concept of if they're doing it or not.
So we do see students unlocking the pouches. I will say that I think there are some students that aren't fully locking them, but again, they're not coming out during instruction. They're not taking them to the restrooms, those sorts of things where we did have that before. And that's our reminder too, to say make sure you're following the process and the protocol. I will tell you that when students unlock the pouches and they're walking out of the building, many are like this. And I'm like, watch where you're going, put your phone away, because they haven't had them all day and they are, anxious to use them.
How do you handle diabetic students who have the phones connected to?
So we have medical pouches, so the students that need their phones can still have their phones on them, and we just hand it on an individual case-by-case basis. They're Velcroed, as opposed to being locked, requiring the magnet.
So when the temptation arises and they're doing more than just, that's when the administration should be called to.
We really haven't run into that with those particular students.
I have one mom she's not quite there yet, but she's very adamant that no one will take her daughter's phone away.
How are these cell phones infractions overlaying with discipline infractions in general? And obviously you were the principal pre-cell phone pouch and you're the principal now, so I would think that you would have a good handle on how that's affected that.
So there's been a significant decrease in overall disruptions in the classrooms. We still have them, but they're not revolving around cell phones. There's been a decrease in physical altercations that stem from a lot of the social media pieces that we had. As far as administration goes and guidance, we have spent a drastically reduced amount of time having to investigate social media drama. There's so many things that get stirred up with those that then trickles into the schools. And we were chasing ghosts, you know, we were having to look at different phones and spend inordinate amounts of time trying to piece out who was saying what to whom. And it has really, really reduced that and really enabled staff to be able to focus on instruction, which is ultimately what our jobs are.
With that going hand in hand, I'm assuming, I mean, this overlays with bullying and infractions are kind of the same thing, but are you seeing less bullying incidents or, you know, fights in the bathroom, for example?
Yes, those have also decreased.
So I'm just wondering if you have the data to support the decrease. I think that is really what the board would be looking for, comparative data from before the implementation to now.
So again, Yonder is in conjunction with a lot of the other pieces that we do at the middle school. It's not just a one, you know, magic wand. We have our house system. We spend a lot of time educating around conscious discipline, positivity project, and restorative practices. But I can tell you that school year 2023-2024, we had 258 instances of disruption versus last year with 145. So that's 113 fewer disruptions. We did see a decrease in fighting. It's a very small decrease, but it is a decrease over time, which is vital. It's just so important. And again, our electronic offenses, last year we saw an increase, but that increase was due to us using our progressive discipline. So whereas that third infraction, that third offense, it then we had a paper trail with the documentation of the electronic offense on that third time. So with us implementing it and following our progressive discipline, we were going to see an increase in that electronic offense.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's also good to note the other interventions that you have put into place to ensure that there's a decrease in, you know, whatever the infractions are. So looking at the data, yes, Yonder may be one piece, but it's also good to note that into your data of the other things that you have implemented, because they're all good things, right? And I think that's good for our public to hear. The other thing that I would like to know is, have we looked at data to see if there's any increase into our grading? What do our kids' grades look like since the implementation of some of these
So
interventions?
to that point, it's really hard to delineate what specific piece, because Yonder, with all of those other initiatives, has increased our academic achievement. So I actually have a conference call scheduled tomorrow with a Yonder representative to try to set some academic goals that are in alignment with our school improvement plan for student achievement. And she's going to help us figure out the ways to be able to track that, because again, without being able to say this alone influenced this piece, I'm interested to see what she has to say.
Yeah, and just go for it. I mean, you don't have to take out one piece of intervention to collect the data, right? And so just go for it. Just, you know, take whatever pieces that we need and just be able to deliver that, because that's what we want to know. We want to know that conscious discipline together with Yonder works and the other things that you have implemented.
Not just, you know, not just like state test scores or MAP or whatever testing, but like are the students getting more Bs instead of Cs? Like all that is part of the piece of data.
How's
sure
it
I
going
could-
with parents who, oh, I'm sorry. How's it going with parents who are not happy about this?
So like our students, some of our parents have very strong feelings about the Yonder pouches. I haven't had any interactions this year. Last year, I did have several parents that said, no, I'm going to tell my student not to utilize the pouch. To which I said, well, the same expectations are going to be held and the same consequences will be enforced. So that's how that is handled.
Have they figured out how they're doing it at the high school with one real phone and one fake phone yet? Have you run into that?
We have run into some dummy phones, yes. But regardless of whether it's the dummy one or the real one, the consequence is the same. So I think the thing that is so important is consistency, the expectations, transparency about what's going to happen with which time. And the great thing that we put into place is we don't put it on the teachers. All the teacher has to do is to call the office and say, I need an admin to come to my room. The admin goes in, and it just takes that power struggle away from the student and the teacher. It doesn't need to become their issue. And because we have been so clear with the expectations, students know. They know whether it's their first infraction or not, and they know what's going to happen. So there's not oh, you're out to get me. No, this is the first time, this is this consequence. The second time, this is this. So it's just matter of fact.
So it sounds like you're saying you're very happy with them and you want to keep them.
I'm very happy at the middle school with utilizing Yonder pouches. They really do increase engagement. They make our lives easier. It's better for the students' mental health. They're not feeling the need to respond in that moment because they know that if they take it out of the pouch, there's a consequences associated with it.
I know today, so coincidentally, I had my first student advisory group at Easton Middle School, and that's the question I asked the students, how is it going? And the students were very positive. They said, well, we know what to do. The announcement comes on in the morning, we put them in. And some of the students that were saying they don't see the cell phones out. So, and even though that's a small group, but still, it's not like any of them said, we don't like this. I mean, it was almost like, oh, we know what we have to do, and we're doing it. So I think the goal will be, because we had said we wanted to hear information tonight, but again, the second half of the school year, since St. Michael's Middle High is just starting, we'll get a whole overview again to see what will be the board's pleasure and everyone in moving forward for the next school year as we did this last school year.
Or I know last year you had some bags that had to be replaced. Is that still consistent, or has that gotten better?
It's gotten better. We had a learning curve at the beginning because we just didn't know what to tell them. Initially, if you remember last year, I had said that once they took their phones out at the end of the day, they were just putting them in their iPad cases. And so a lot of times the pins were getting pushed inadvertently and bending. So now we know better. So we tell them, like, as soon as you take your phone you unlock it, take it out of the pouch, and you're getting ready to go home for the day, make sure you close it back up so it's locked, so that pin is secure and it doesn't get bent. Now, we still have an occasional middle schooler who is, very ingenious and tries to figure out how to pick the lock, and it's very telling. So when they're damaged, it is, restitution that they have to replace the pouch.
And I do know, just because cell phones is still a very hot topic nationally, our state is still conducting research and doing a survey statewide about cell phones. So I don't know when that's going to conclude, but they're still collecting feedback as to how each district is doing. I don't know if they're making a decision statewide or not, or still leaning on just districts to do their own thing, but they're still collecting data.
Do we know, this is for Dr. Pete, but do we know how many counties have implemented this type of pouch now? I'm just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I can find out. I definitely know when we first started, it was us, Dorchester, and Caroline, and not sure if they've continued with theirs, but I'll find out how many out of the 24 have the Yonder.
So this isn't a question for you, it's just, my random thoughts with the data that we are actually seeing here. I'm wondering if it's the actual implementation of the Yonder pouches itself, or is it enforcement of the original policy, and the yonder pouches are just helping us as staff be compliant with such policy. Does that make sense? And so when we're looking at implementing the yonder pouches at other schools, if that was to come to pass, is it worth the finances that we will have to be able to put forward for the yonder pouches? So that's kind of what I'm thinking. So when I'm looking at data, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
It's definitely a behavioral change.
I can tell you, I think it would be much harder to implement without the pouches, because we said for years, make sure your phones are off and away, make sure they're away, and there's one ding or one vibration and it's right in there and the phones are out. And instruction is secondary to all the things on here.
Because they have nowhere else to put them, right?
Yeah, they were putting them in their iPad cases previously, but you feel it, you hear it, and it's instinctual. What am I missing? Who has said what about what, and what do I need to be part of?
Think that having an offense system without a pouch would be effective.
I think we would spend a great part of our day policing it.
We have to ask because, money's tight.
What is the Checkmate Inn?
So that is a room where students still receive all of their education. Teachers go in, they check in with them, they get their work, they get any kind of specialized services in that room, but it's basically a room away from the regular classrooms. So it's a consequence of not being in your regular school day. Thank you all.
Have information about St. Michael's. I thought we had that on our list.
Was that in the? Okay, so it's in their information, yeah. So we provided the information, however, I guess it's been, 2 or 3 weeks they've started. I actually was there, I just happened to be there. That may have been the second day they started, and I was just kind of just witnessing them unlocking it at the doorway. But I think it's been about just 3 weeks that they've done it.
My question around the St. Michael's is the presentation states that it's 6 through 12, and I thought we had only voted to implement it in grades 6 through 8.
It
So
is. Oh, go ahead.
I guess I'm just wondering, since my understanding of the prior vote was implement for middle school grades only, how it ended up being implemented for also the high school, and was that part of the funding that we originally approved?
So it's not in the high school. I think they just included infractions for the high school. So the pouches are only at St. Michael's Middle School. So we'll be able to provide data once they are further down the road.
And that's still good data, because if you look at grades 6 through 8, it's significantly lower than the high school grades for infractions.
I spoke to Mr. Stoker, and we tried to mirror the presentation of the data just so that you could have some alignment.
So we'll come back in the second half of the year. We'll be able to hear Mr. Stoker, hear how you're continuing to do it, to see what will that look like for the 26-27 school year.
Okay, so it looks like the next thing on our agenda is the school improvement plan with Dr. Einhorn and Dr. Pepkai.
So I just want to give a little background before we jump into school improvement. So with any system, and now that we have our strategic plan, that's district-wide, but we know the work for each individual school has to take place, right? We're overall district, but then it has to get down to the school level. One thing in 2022 when I came, one first change I made was to have Dr. Einhorn wear the principal supervisor hat. And so I wanted to assure that there was someone in the system that would be able to be the direct point contact for principals in doing work in their schools. And so immediately she went off to AASA, which is the superintendent's body, and went to a conference, a principal supervisors conference, to learn about all that goes into principal supervision. She did an action research project from that, and has been working in this area of school improvement. And so what you're going to hear tonight is what has gone into school improvement for each of our 8 schools, what the principals, not by themselves, but with teams and with community members, parents, stakeholders in their schools have done around looking at data in their school and moving the needle in various areas in their schools.
Thank you, Vice President Dotson and members of the board. I'm really excited to share with you the work we're doing around school improvement and transforming our processes to make it more meaningful and impactful on student achievement. So school improvement, when implemented well, is a key lever for improving outcomes for students, academic, behavioral, social, emotional, attendance-wise, all indicators for students. And the work that we've been doing in TCPS around school improvement was actually identified by 4 points in their process of working with us as a promising practice that we needed to continue to scale up to see improvements through our strategic plan. And when a school improvement process is implemented well, the plans that are developed serve kind of as a roadmap for the work that the school is going to do to improve outcomes for students. It ensures that the school is identifying where are our students now in terms of their achievement and their other indicators. It also helps the school identify where students need to be. What is our hope for improving outcomes for students? What are those goals that we're setting for ourselves? It allows schools to think about what actions they'll take to meet those goals, keeps the work focused on what's most important. There are so many demands in our schools. The plans bring us back to what is it that we have set as our work for this year and beyond. It allows us to share the priorities with all of our staff, and I would say also our larger school community, make sure that we're using our resources responsibly. That's one of the things I know the board is talking about, but it also allows us a transparent way to monitor school progress. There's a lot of research around school improvement, which leads us to believe, again, that not just 4 points telling us, but the research is showing that school improvement is an important lever for student outcomes, both in education, but also improvement planning in any organization is a way to focus your work and see improvements. We also know that school improvement is so important that it is one of the standards on which our school leaders are evaluated each year, and specifically for their work around continuous improvement to make sure that they are fulfilling the mission and vision of their school and that they're promoting the core values, but also that they're engaging others in their school community to look at data, to set goals, to implement and evaluate the work they're doing. So we know that it is important for us to focus as a district on school improvement. We began this work prior to the board engaging in their strategic planning, but really exciting to see that the board's core principles align with the work we started in school improvement. Specifically, the area around continuous improvement, the board has determined that we are committed to continuous improvement through innovation, collaborative planning, integrated and inclusive decision-making, effective leadership, and accountability. And that is exactly what school improvement planning is. So as I started working with principals and schools more closely, one of the things that I leaned into was where are we in our school improvement process? And what I was able to discover was that we were using this template for school improvement. It has served us well for about 15 years, but we know that as we learn more, we need to do better. And we discovered in the process that we were engaging in, there were some key elements that were missing in our practice. So one of the ways to create change is to make technical change where you just tell someone what they're going to do. So we could have just given them a new process and said, this is what we are now required to do. For meaningful change, we knew we had to participate in adaptive leadership change, and that's really about bringing people along in their beliefs and their actions so that the work is meaningful. So in order to improve our school improvement efforts, the first thing we did is we put together a work group that was comprised of district level staff, school leadership, and also teachers, because we know for school improvement to be value added, every member of the organization has to understand the why behind the process and their part in the work that's going to be done. We embarked on a very ambitious timeline because we realized we could not wait an additional year to begin our work. So the committee was formed in April of 2024 and began meeting in May. We focused at looking at what is the why behind school improvement, what was our current reality, and from all of the members on the team, from their expertise and their lens, what were some of the things they thought would be important in our process. The committee also met to look at the 4 domains for school improvement, rapid school improvement, and also to look at other examples of school improvement processes in different organizations and in different states, and to identify what were we seeing in other school improvement templates and process that we thought would be valuable for improving the quality of our work. We've always been doing the work, but it's about improving the quality to get better results. So the team identified what they thought would be valuable. Mr. Lee Nield, who you've heard from previously around our data and our local accountability, created a draft dashboard for the committee to take a look at, and we spent some time just identifying, did that really capture everything we had identified, and where were we going to start? The committee came to consensus, and in July of 2024, we rolled out the new school improvement dashboard, not just to our leadership team, but we asked our principals and assistant principals to bring the teacher leaders in their building who would be on their school improvement teams. So everybody was engaging in the new process together to go forward and implement it.
I think we had talked about in the past, us as board members having access to the dashboard. Where are we at with that?
So I guess it's the school, every school's dashboard or our district dashboard that we're going to see on Wednesday. We're going to talk about the dashboard for Wednesday.
I mean, I'm fine with district, but
Okay.
And I apologize, I'm using dashboard because that's what we call our new platform for putting in all the school information. I should have clarified that a little bit better.
Yeah.
One of the things I just wanted to share with you, because sometimes we talk about having committees and then I come back and report to you, but I think it's important for you to also hear from those who are on the committee. So for each one of the sessions, we would do evaluations of how our team was working together in this process. And one of the things that really came out in all the feedback was that the members of the team felt it was a collaborative, transparent process. They also felt there was value in having multiple perspectives, not just districts saying what to do, not just school leadership, but also teachers being in that space and their voice being as important as anyone else who was on that committee. One teacher, for example, said, it's not often that I'm in a space of countywide staff at different levels. This important work needs these varied perspectives. I also appreciated that we were allowed to be vulnerable, share the areas where improvement is needed without judgment. So this really was a collaborative process. So I'm just going to go through quickly what our dashboard looks like now. So previously, we had basically a Word document that schools filled out. It lived somewhere within their building. The dashboard for school improvement is interactive. As much as possible, we created drop-down boxes so that schools could just identify their areas there. This is the landing page. What I will highlight here is when this was built out, it was focused on the 3 priorities the board had, and that part needs to be updated to reflect our new strategic plan because everything is in alignment to the county strategic plan. One of the key pieces that we noted in our previous process is that there was no way for the former template to capture all of the information in one place so that it was readily accessible. One of the pieces that was missing from our previous process was capturing who the team members were on the school improvement team. So on the dashboard, that team members part actually expands down, and it is a requirement that you have your school leadership, you have teacher leaders, but you also have parents and, when appropriate, community members who are part of your team to give multiple perspectives.
So one thing, when I went around to each school to their staff meeting to do the roundtables, I talked to them about school improvement, and I talked to them about, and I said, okay, who's on the school improvement plan on the staff? And so the teachers raised their hand so that other staff could hear what's taking place and so that they understand what we're doing as a whole organization around school improvement.
Another area that we noted that we were not effective in capturing was our needs assessment process. So our schools are always looking at data, but we didn't have a way to look at it consistently across the district and to capture the work that was being done in that data analysis. It was in capturing all this information is not a matter of compliance, but it's actually identifying where do some schools have strength in the work that they're doing, so all of our schools can work together to support each other in a more rigorous process. So in a needs assessment process, and this was the example for math, but schools do it for each one of their goal areas. They gather the data they have, they look at 3-year trends, they identify based on the data a problem statement, and then they engage in a root cause analysis where they start to ask, why does that problem exist? To really get down to the core of what the issue is, so that we're not putting together a plan that is just putting any strategies in there, but the strategies are matching what it is that is causing the results that we're getting. And I know that, Ms. Strawberry, you often ask, like, who is doing the work of really getting into what our equity plan says we need to do when it calls out that we're collecting and analyzing data on student achievement, school climate, discipline, and other relevant factors to identify inequity, and to develop goals, objectives, strategies, and timelines for the implementation of equitable practices to change that data, student outcomes for those students. And that is the work that each one of our schools are doing through this new needs assessment process. So again, this is just a screenshot of how the dashboard plays out. Schools are required to have a goal around literacy and around mathematics because we know that those are our key focus areas in priority 1 of the new strategic plan. Schools also select a 3rd goal, which is based on data that is specific to their school, but is required to be tied to one of the accountability measures that we have. So it could be chronic absenteeism, it could be student discipline. So the school really identifies what it is they want to work on. But for each one of their goals that they come up with, they must do a needs assessment process and capture that. And then they develop a SMARTY goal. This, too, is a change that we found we needed to make from our previous process. We have always written SMART goals which means they have to be specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. Our schools were very good at doing that. So an example might be that we are going to increase student math proficiency on MCAP by 5%. Our schools were used by June of 2025. But it didn't allow us to identify the student groups who were furthest from meeting proficiency in their areas. So the SMARTY goal asks schools not just to come up with an overall goal, but to identify which student groups in their school are furthest from that. So schools are focusing on all, but then they are also identifying those groups for whom they have to have more specific strategies and action steps to have different outcomes. And that is based on their needs assessment. So really drilling down more specifically so we can focus on how do we improve overall, but also how do we start to minimize those gaps that we see year after year. And this new planning process makes that a requirement of their work. Once the school has done their needs assessment, they've created their SMARTY goal, then they identify strategies that will help them meet the goal that they've set. It also has to include detailed action steps of how you're going to get there, because we all know a plan has to have specificity in order to move results. And so really identifying if we think that if a goal is to improve student reading of informational text, what is a high leverage strategy that we're going to do around that? But then what are the specific actions? Who's responsible and what's the timeline for doing that? So there's accountability for ensuring that that takes place. We also realized that we needed to include indicators of student success. So if our overall goal is to increase student proficiency on MCAP, we have measures which we've talked about and looked at previously that help us see throughout the year whether we're making that progress, whether that be MAP, classroom assessments. So the school would identify what data are they looking at throughout the year to monitor the work that they're doing. The other piece we included was indicator of staff success. So what is it that we expect to see teachers, the adults in our building doing differently to get different results? So if we want to focus on informational text, and one of our strategies is to use pre-reading strategies, then you might have a walkthrough that captures data on our teachers implementing pre-reading strategies in the classroom. Not enough to say it on paper and think it's going to happen, but what is our shared accountability for ensuring those action steps are being put in place? I apologize, this is a very ugly looking slide. So last year, school teams implemented this new dashboard. It's a learning process for everyone to change our thinking and our way of doing. So at the end of the year, we had some reflection on what worked, what didn't work. And then we also wanted to be more deliberate in identifying how we're implementing our school improvement plans. So within the strategic plan, school improvements live in priority 4, aligning our systems. And so we created a rubric that doesn't just measure our schools implementing the school improvement plan, but as a 4-point rubric, are they in the stage for each aspect of the plan of developing, approaching the expectation, meeting the expectation, or exceeding the expectation? This is not intended to be a grade that you're not doing something right. It is meant to be looking at how you're currently implementing it, what's your next right step to make improvements in how your team is working together and putting your plan together. Also allows us to plan professional learning for our school improvement teams and to identify where certain schools might be a resource to another school. So we're working more collaboratively in order to improve our efforts. So a couple of quotes here. Again, just to capture some of the feedback on what this work is doing. I'm going to acknowledge that it's a lot of work, but it's the right work. And we're going to get to a point where we're doing it really well, but it's already having impact on our thinking and doing within our schools. So what's being called out by some of our school leaders around school improvement is that we've become more intentional about individual student improvement. It's not just about the all, it's about how are we helping to improve outcomes for each student. And not only that, with our new process, each member of the team at the school improvement team, and also the teachers in the school, they're aligning their practices to school improvement goals so that everyone within the school is involved and invested in student growth. And as a team effort, we hope to see greater improvement. From Dr. Clow at Chapel, she speaks to just the new school improvement process being an integral part of helping staff to understand data better, but also where they want to go with their work in the school. She notes that I believe it has helped to clarify and align our process so our school's mission has clear and consistent checkpoints to hold all stakeholders accountable. And one of the areas where Dr. Clow wanted to grow this year in her school improvement process was the adding of parents and community members. So she now has 5 parents and community members who are sitting on her school improvement team. One of them is also on our Citizens Advisory Committee, and at our last meeting, she was able to share the goals of the school and how they were going to measure whether or not students were meeting them. So when we get parents involved at that level, then we know we're starting to move the work forward. And just the last thing I have to share with you tonight is just a visual of how we're trying to think about school improvement in Talbot County Public Schools. Our first year in doing the work was all about aligning our process, our school improvement process, to the board's goals. This year, we're really talking about coherence, how every part of our system is supporting continuous improvement. So our school improvement process begins with a focus on the Aligned by 2029 strategic plan and what's been outlined there. The schools then work on their school improvement plan focused on literacy, math, and a school choice goal. And the teacher student learning objectives are how we're going to get to the school improvement plan and how we're going to get to the goals in the strategic plan. Principal student learning objectives are also aligned to school improvement plans, so all parts of the continuous improvement are working together to move us to that end.
I just want to say that I'm happy to hear that parents and community members are being included on some of these school-based committees, because I think that's something that we've heard from the community, that they want to be more involved. So I think that's fantastic.
I think it's wonderful that our teachers are included, because that's one of the biggest complaints that I've heard, is they don't have a voice. So that makes me really happy. Thank you.
Judgment-free voice, too. Yeah.
And I think too, like I said, when I did my staff roundtables, I talked about this notion of school improvement not as being evaluative or I gotcha, but that we're all having this growth mindset of looking at data, being very transparent, and seeing what we need to focus on and moving together in the work. So even though I know you heard Dr. Irons, it's a lot of work, but I think for everyone to understand that why and what we're doing and being aligned and everybody moving in the right direction.
I really like this. That's one thing. Secondly, I just have questions about the needs assessment. So the school improvement plans that I believe I saw the comment from Dr. Cloud and Dr. Bullock? Okay, are those into last year's work, or is this a part of their needs assessment for this upcoming year?
So their reflections here are on how the process is transforming the work they're doing in their schools right now. So it's based on where they started last year and trying to implement this, identifying what worked, what didn't, and now coming into our second year, really growing from that. I know in both of those schools, all teachers are involved in this process, having gone to their meetings. Their school improvement team at Chapel is a core group, and they opened up their meeting, and every teacher came to their school improvement meeting. They are so invested in it.
Nice. Now, my second part to this question is when it comes time to put this into practice, because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of important work. What is the time frame for the needs assessment? Can you talk a little bit about the timeline from needs assessment to creating your action plan? When are we measuring and monitoring?
So, Ms. Strawberry, I feel like you should have been part of our initial team because that's actually with the rubric that we put together this year, we had timelines in there. So we get our MCAP data sometime in mid-July. Teachers come back to school in August, so they start working on the needs assessment then. The hope is that your needs assessment is done by early September, ambitious as you're learning the process, and that your school improvement plans are, at least your goals and action steps are starting to form by the end of September, so teachers can then create their SLOs aligned to your school improvement plan. What we're discovering is we're always trying to catch up. And what we're currently looking at now is how might we move our process up earlier? There are some school districts who have school improvement plans due by the end of June for the next school year. And your state data is then used to confirm what your local data has been showing. So we're looking at how we might, as we grow this process, move our timeline back and even look at how do these plans not just stand as a single year, but some strategies may take 2 years to put into place, especially if it requires significant professional learning for staff, getting teachers to practice, and then actually having it implemented well.
Thank you. I was wondering that because, depending on what the needs are, so cultural and behavior changes take time, sometimes years. So I just didn't want our school leadership to feel like they're not accomplishing goals, and because sometimes that can hold us back. So I'm glad to hear that you guys already have that into perspective. And then just lastly, when I looked at your action plan template, that. So I see the rating, I see feedback. I want to know or want to be sure that even if a strategy is in progress, that the leadership is able to put in the feedback session whatever their barrier or challenges are, even if it's in progress. So that way, if it's something that the board needs to assist, align with, we kind of know early in advance of how we can assist school leadership.
Yes, and this rubric is really feedback to the teams, but you've actually kind of just spurred in my mind, how do the teams give feedback regarding their work? So one aspect that was previously missing was how do we gather and keep track of the artifacts that show the work that we're doing. So there's also a section on this dashboard where schools can put in artifacts if they implemented a professional learning. And just like a teacher writing a lesson plan, it's not just a matter of compliance, but as you are seeing that strategy and action step roll out, you can then go back and look at what you did in order to try to see, was that the piece that moved your outcomes? Was it something else? Was there a barrier there? Was there something that you missed? So we kind of have a rolling artifact of the work we're doing so we can find out what is the lever that's making change and then how do we scale that up.
And then additional, so when you think about schools and our district office here that are supporting the schools, so one thing we're doing new this year is going to each school and allowing the principal and her team or whoever she invites to the table to come to a district office team to be able to articulate their plan to us so that we can hear what are the needs that we can then assist with them. So if they need work with an ELA supervisor or a math supervisor to be able to help with professional development or anything, we want them to be able to talk to us about those needs as well and give us feedback as to how we can help them.
I would find it interesting to see some examples of the strategies and actions. Just generally speaking, not every single one for every category at every school, but I think it would be very interesting to just see a handful of what they've observed and what they have determined to be an effective strategy and how they're going to execute that.
So I know that there's background talk occasionally that you hear that we're dumbing things down. So how do we address this when we're approached, especially now that we've changed SMART to SMARTY, and that's so controversial. But it goes across inclusivity and equity. People don't remember that it's not just one group.
So one of the things that I would call out, that there's nothing controversial about naming the students who you are not serving well yet to meet their potential. Because if you don't name it, you can't identify what it is you need to do in your practice as a teacher, as a building leader, to improve outcomes for those students. So anyone who would suggest that it's controversial, we would be negligent in our responsibility as educators if we were not really interrogating why it is that some students are not being successful and what we might do. It does not mean you're taking anything else away from someone else. In fact, many of the strategies included in the school improvement plan will improve outcomes for all of our students if we're more intentional in what we do. But we're not going to close the achievement gaps if we don't name where we need to do most of the work.
And I agree. And I think we need to make sure that that is presented to the community.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Einhorn. I'm correct, and it doesn't look like we have anything else on our agenda tonight. So, Ms. Bridges, would you like to make a motion?
Motion that we close tonight.
I'll second that. All right, everybody, thank you so much. We'll see you back on Wednesday night.